Alright guys, welcome to another video of our React.js tutorial series. In this video, we're going to talk about useEffect. Remember in our last video, we talked about the React hooks and what the hooks brought into the functional components. So in this video, we're going to talk about one of the React hooks and we're talking about the useEffect hooks. We're going to see how it is being implemented and why we need the useEffect hook to build our application. See, in React, side effects like fetching user data, maybe you want to fetch user post, you want to fetch all products for a particular website, or even you want to update the DOM. All of these actions can never happen in the main component, and that is why we have a hook like useEffect. So in this video, we're going to break down how the useEffect works, why it is powerful, and how to use it to perform some side effects. In a React component, we often need to perform actions that basically don't need to render the components. So things like fetching of data, like I said earlier, setting up subscriptions if you're building subscription-based application, and all of that. You don't need to modify the DOM. All of these things are called side effects, right? You can perform side effects in your application without updating the DOM. And the best way to perform side effects in React is by using a React hook, and one of the best hooks that does that for us is the useEffect hook. So before we head over to our code editor to see what the useEffect hooks look like and how we can use it to perform some side effects, I'm going to run us through some of the benefits and things you need to know about the useEffect hooks. Here I say the useEffect hook runs after the component renders, right? Take note of that. It only runs after you're done rendering your component. And here I said it prevents unnecessary refetching. For example, you want to fetch the list of products in a particular website. Since the useEffect only works or functions or runs after the components have rendered, it is only going to run once, which is going to prevent unnecessary refetching of data. Right here I said it can be triggered based on dependencies. So when we start coding, we're going to see what we mean by dependencies and how it can be triggered. And lastly, I said it can handle cleanups for subscriptions, event listeners. Mind you, we have a video for event listeners, event listeners. You can go back to the video for reference, right? So all of these things are very important and necessary, and some of the benefits of the useEffect hooks. And we're heading over to our code editor to see how to implement the useEffect hooks in our React application. So here we are in our React application we've been using from the beginning of this series. And the first thing we're going to do is to run our application in our terminal by doing npm run dev. This will open up our application in port 5173. We open it in a browser, and yeah, it's loading. Our application is loading, and yeah, it's a blank application because of course in our app.jsx nothing is there. So one thing I want you to take note is that your useEffects, or probably your let's say generally your React hooks, only appears inside the main component. So you cannot have your hooks not allowed here, hooks not allowed here, right? You only have your hooks here. For example, you want to create a use state hook, you can say const state use state equal to use state, right? So this is what you do. You don't do it the other way around by saying const state equal to this. So we don't do that in React. So the hook we want to talk about today is the useEffect hook, and this is what the useEffect hooks looks like. So the useEffect hooks takes two parameters. The first parameter is the callback function, which is basically the side effect. The side is function that is going to run. Maybe you want to make API call, you want to fetch all users, you want to do anything, it happens here. And this is the second parameter, is the dependency that is going to help in triggering this useEffect. How many times you want the useEffect to run is going to be included in the dependency in place for the dependency. So we'll go ahead to perform our first operation, which is to log out to our console to say useEffect is working. So inside the useEffect, where I'm supposed to have the side effect functions, I'm going to just log out to my console. Hello, useEffect is working. If I save this and I go to my browser, Of course, you will not see anything, but I'll open up my developer tool, go to my console, and yeah, we're going to have an error. Right, please pay attention to this. Here we say uncaught reference error, useEffect is not defined, and this is because we did not import useEffect from React, right? We did not do that. So let's do that by saying useEffect, and if we save this and go back to application, we now have hello, useEffect is working. Right, so this is the first example of useEffect, and the next thing we're going to do, we're going to perform a very minimal operation. So let me explain. The first operation we're going to perform, we're going to create a loader effect. We're going to create a loader effect, which by default the loader is going to load in our application. So whenever we open an application, it's loading, and we're going to hide this loader after some seconds using the useEffect and also using the set timer function from JavaScript, right? So how do we do that, and what do we need to do that? First of all, going to create a loader component in our loader page. Inside my loader page, I'm just going to create a file called loader.jsx. So inside my loader.jsx, I'm going to create a loader component that is going to be exported and imported in the app.js. So this is just going to return a JSX, and I'm just going to return a div that is returning a paragraph called loading. Right, I'm going to add basic styling to this. In one of our videos, we're going to talk about styling in React.js. So this, I'm just going to give it a display of flex. I'm going to give it a position of relative. I'm going to give it a height and a width. I'm going to give it a background color. Right, I'll save this, and the next thing I'm going to do is to export this component so I can import it in my JSX, in my app.js rather. So I'm just going to modify this, and I'm going to import my loader. Pay attention, this imported from components/loader. So if I save this and go back to application, we're supposed to see the loader text, right? So let me center this text. Okay, I'll center the text by saying justify content should be center, align item should be center. So I have it here at the center. So the next thing we're going to do is to create a function that will help us disappear this text, right? That will help to disappear this text or take away this text from our screen after some time. So I'm going to create in our app.jsx, I'm going to create a function called hide loader. So what is this function doing for me? The function is going to hide this loader after 4 seconds. So we're going to use a JavaScript function or method called setTimeout. The setTimeout takes two parameters. The setTimeout takes two parameters. The first parameter is the function, and the second parameter is the duration. The first parameter, let me get this correctly. Yeah. The first parameter is the function which is going to run, and the second parameter is the duration. All right. So in our function, we're just going to, this is where we're going to display, or this is where we're going to hide our loader, right? This is where we're going to hide our loader. Let's just hold this dot here. So let's go over to create a function called a state called loader. We're going to say const state. Let's say const loading set loading is going to, we're going to use the use state equal to use state, and by default our use state is going to be true because I want to display my loader immediately I go to my page, and I'm going to hide it after 4 seconds, right? So that means here we're going to change this to 4000 milliseconds, which is equal to 4 seconds. So since the state is true, I want to change this state to false after 4000 seconds, 4000 milliseconds, right? So I'm going to call the state setter here. We're not done. We're going to do a few more things before we can continue, before we can see we're done with this operation. So the next thing we're going to do is to call the hide loader function in our useEffect, right? Which means I want to only call this function when my component is done rendering, right? If I save this, I think we're done. But one more thing, right? We're not done. I want to hide this loader after the state is set to false. That means the visibility of this loader depends on the state of this loader state here. So how do I do that? Remember, we talked about conditional rendering in one of our videos. You can go back to it if you want to make reference. So here I'm just going to render this conditionally, and I'm going to say if loading is true, show loader, if not, hide loader. So if I save this and I go back to application, right, and I reload, it's going to display for after 4 seconds, it's going to disappear. So this is basically how to use the useEffect hook to conditionally render your component. So in our next example, we're going to see how we can make an API call, right? So I'm going to create a video, one of the videos for this series. We're going to talk about API calls, right? But for the sake of this useEffect hook, let's just demonstrate how you can make an API call in useEffect hook, save the data in a state, and see how you can use list rendering, one of our videos, to render those data, right? First of all, we're going to go over to a platform called placeholder. We have here JSON placeholder. Go to JSON placeholder, right? So here we're going to go to guide, click on guide, and we're going to see free endpoints that we can use for simulations. So I'm just going to use this post endpoint. This endpoint is going to return list of posts made in our application, right? So I'm just going to copy this code, head over to application. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a state for my post. I'm going to say const posts and set state, set post equal to use state, which is going to be my post. So by default, my post is an empty array, right? This is the first thing to do. So the next thing to do is to create a function that will help fetch all of these posts. So I'm going to say fetch data or fetch post, right? Fetch post. Here I'm going to create a function to fetch posts, right? So this function is going to call the JSON placeholder API, right? I'm just using the JavaScript fetch to fetch the API, and I'm going to do this. So, right, so here we are. After I've converted our data to JSON, I'm going to save the JSON in our state, and of course, let me go back to what we have. I'm going to catch the error and just log it to my console. That is the second step. So the third step is to first of all call the fetch post function in our useEffect. So how do I do that? I'm going to copy this from here and go to my useEffect hook, right? I'm going to call my fetch post function. So how do we implement the loader in this case? So in this case, I'm having my loader to be true, right? I'm only hiding my loader when I'm done fetching this post. So for the period of time I'm going to be making this API call, I want to show my loader in my screen. That means the hide loader is now going to go out of our code, right? So I'm only calling the fetch post method, or fetch post function rather. So when I'm fetching the post, my loader is showing. When I'm done, I want to hide my loader. If I save this and I go back to our application, if I reload this, you're going to see the loader. After a while, the loader will disappear. So how do we know if we fetched our data? Let's go to our terminal and see if after we're done loading, let us log out the data we fetched in our console. So if we do this and load, after we're done, you'll see in the data, we'll fetch the data, right? We'll fetch the data. So the next thing we're going to do is to create a data component. So here we're changing from short circuit to ternary operator, right? So we're saying if you're loading, right, show the loader, else if you're not loading, show the post component. So we're going to create this component. Let's go over to our component page. Let's create a file called post.jsx. So in our post.jsx, we're only going to return a component. So we're going to create a component called post. We're going to return a JSX, which is going to be basically our post, right? So if we do this, we're going to, if we save this, and of course, let's export our component. If we go to our home page at app.jsx and we import our post component, from our post component page. If we save this and go back to our application, we're going to have this. Right, we're going to have this. Well, let's make this better. Go back to our post.jsx and we're going to do this. We're going to change this to a paragraph tag, and this works better. So here we're going to create a box. We're going to create a div element with just basic styling. I'm going to give it a height. I'm going to give it a width. I'm going to give it a background color of red. So if I do this, this is what we have, right? This is good. I'm going to wrap all of this in a div, and I'm going to style this div. I'm going to give this div a display of flex. I'm going to make it relative, and I'm going to give it a background color of white. Right, so I'm going to paste all of this here. So this is what we have. I'm going to give it a flex of 1. So basically I have this, right? Let's go back to style this. I'll give this a color of black. So what do we want to achieve? We want to achieve a situation where after fetching this data, we want to display this data in our page, right, using the map method. Now we're going to pass in this data we saved in our state as prop to the post component. So we're going to pass it as data prop to the post component. If I save this and go back to my post, I have to accept this prop, right, as data, right? So the next thing we're going to do is to map through this data to render these boxes, right? If I do that, I'm going to say data.map, right? Data.map, excuse me. If I do that, I'm going to say data.map post index. Right, so here I'm only going to return the JSX we have before, which is basically the box with background color of red. So what is happening here? If you don't understand what's happening here, go back to our video on React list rendering. You're going to understand how we're rendering list in React, right? So I have the index. I'm going to pass in the index as the key of the component. If I save this and I go back to our browser, we're going to have this, right? So the first thing we're going to do is to add a margin to the boxes. Let's just say a margin of 10 pixels. This is going to create space between them. If I go back, now have the spaces. This is a 100 box, which represents the 100 posts we got. Right, let me make this better. This is going to display I already have, okay, this is going to display flex, and we're going to say flex direction should be row. Flex direction should be row. So if I save this, I have this, right? I have these boxes. Pretty cool. Let me just justify to center. Right, so I have these boxes. We've been able to display these boxes, but if you look at our developer tool, you're going to see that we have this data. Each of the data have the body property, the ID property, the title property, and the user ID property. So let's see how we can display some of these properties in the boxes, right? So to achieve that, I'm going to add a bold element. In the bold element, I'm just going to say post.title, right? So each of the posts will have its own title. That is very ugly. I'm going to give a little styling to the box, to the paragraph. I'm going to give it a font size of 9 pixels, which is looking a little bit okay. Let me give it 4 pixels, depending on what you have, right? So this is what I have, and it can also display the ID property of the post. You can say ID. It's giving you ID. This is 33, this is 34, this is 35, right? So this is how we've been able to, if I reload the page, it takes time to load, and after loading, the loader is disappearing and our component is being rendered, right? So this is how to render lists using the useEffect hook and all of that. So guys, what did you take out from this video? I told us how to use the useEffects to fetch data from API, and after a while save the data in our state and render the data in our application. Do not forget, your React hooks always appear in your main component. It doesn't appear outside of your main component. So that is it for this video, guys. If you have any question, drop in the comment section. If you don't have, please like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to turn on your notification button so that you get notified when we post our next video. See you guys in the next video. Bye.